Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ryan coming to you live from Cleveland, Ohio, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Well, I love doing this. Lisa and I have never met, but we met through Gleb Tispersky, who is another expert on the show. And he gave me a list of, gosh, Lisa, it must be 75 different professional people that he knows and is connected to. He's like, anybody you want. And so I thumbed through and I got to your name and I said, stop everything right there. Lisa's number one. And this is no fool. And I'm not
Aw.
like trying to butter your bread or nothing, but it's look, to talk to someone who understands human engagement, culture, corporate culture the way you do, these are important conversations because quite often when we hear these people talk about things like culture, the level of expertise stops there. They know to say the
Right.
word culture, but they struggle to define it, to show you how it works, how it should behave, how to notice when it's not behaving well. So I thought we would just start with a fair but tough question because there's always different answers. How do you define culture?
Culture is what you feel when you walk in the building. Because you can really feel culture. And I've used this example in my programs all the time. I mean, you can walk into a business and feel if the employees like working there, or you can feel if they hate it there. If you are a candidate walking in for a job interview, it's like there's this gut feeling that tells you, is this a place I want to work? Is this a person I want to work for? And when you can get that culture right, because people can say all kinds of things about culture and they can say and have all the pretty things there, but people know and they can feel it. So
Right.
it's kind of a not quite the definition, but it's what I aim for is how do you get that? So when people walk in there, they're like, I want to do business with you. I want to work with you.
Yeah, there has to be a congruence, right? Like if you on the walls it says all these great slogans and everything and you can't experience it, there's a problem with congruence of your culture and like what you're trying to share. And
Yeah.
those things can all be good factors. It's just like are you acting what you're, putting out there? I think is
Yeah.
a good indicator right away.
And if you walk through the office or you walk through the plant and you point to that, beautiful saying up on the wall and ask the employee, so what do you think about that? Are they going to be absolutely committed to it or are they going to say, yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah. I had a couple people from Tuthill Corporation. It's a manufacturing plant in the Midwest, and I had to get Jay Tuthill, the guy whose name is on the outside of the building, because th- these employees, first off, he spent his own money to go out and have his guys try to understand what happiness is, as a corporation, because he's so passionate about like even if you're going to leave us to do something else, how do we get you more founded? In that dream, in that path. If you're not going to stay, that's fine. Let's figure it out. If you need to be somewhere else, great, that's fine. But he spent, money to, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to push these guys out all over the place to make a video series. And as you know, like that stuff's not cheap. This is
No.
expensive. And as these guys talked about, Chad Gabriel's one of them. As he talked about his role in the company, you heard what Jay wanted coming right through them, and not because they were parroting it, but because it was truly part of the corporate culture.
Well, and the fact that he cares enough to ask the question, I kind of make a joke about it all the time, but after one of my programs, somebody walks up to me and they're like, oh my God, my company really needs you.
Yes.
I know in my heart there's no way that that company is going to hire me because it's the companies who are already doing things well and want to do things better and make that investment and take that time and get to know their employees and spread that throughout the culture. The ones that desperately need it, they don't take the time because they just really don't care, which is sad.
Yeah. I have a friend that works for a big corporation in the service industry, and they were talking about the condition of their employment. And they basically live in fear far too often, way more often than the CEO intends, right? And then when you look at like the behavior of the employees, and this person performs at the highest level, always gets great ratings, and part of it is because they're so impassioned about the job, but they're not because they're it's not because they're proud or because like I do a great job because of the great company. It's like, this is what I do. And in spite of the company, that this person performs. And then to the next step, if you were to look as a operations boss or someone like that who's focused on the culture of your company, when the employees don't accept the benefits of a good job, like, hey, come out to headquarters and we want to like see you. And they're like, no, thanks.
Right.
You don't know it. This person's a fantastic employee, but you've undervalued them. They're disengaged and they're not participating in a way that's normal. These are all cultural cues.
Right. Yeah, and you don't know when that day is going to happen. That day, which is going to be one of the worst days of your business life, is when that amazing, awesome employee who is contributing because they're passionate about their job and they're doing all of this good work in spite of what's going on there. One day they're going to come in and they're going to give their notice because somebody down the street who may not even be a competitor, who may not even be offering them more money than you're paying them, but they're making them feel valued, appreciated, recognized, respected, and they can woo them over for a lateral position, same money, sometimes even less money, because that person wants to go somewhere where they feel they don't live in that fear that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's such a good point. When you are out there as a business owner, and for sure, business owners consume this product that this person works for. You're always looking for great employees. If you see someone, you're like, you really do a great job. How well are you taken care of? Can I get this person out of this chair and put him in a chair? Because I would love to have this. I would love to take a risk on this person in lateral, maybe adjacent to lateral, whatever it is, maybe up. Like, hey, I value what you're doing. I see you running a business, because that's in effect what this person does. Runs a little, factory. Yeah, I want some of you in my company is a real thing. And again, the CEO I know doesn't want that outcome. Doesn't want the emotional value that this person holds with the job. They want it's incongruent with their goals. I know it's true, but like you said, I can go knock on the door. Hey, I'd like to help you with your cultural situations. Like, no, thanks.
Right, exactly. Oh, we're fine. If there was a problem, my employees would tell me.
Would they?
Yeah, right.
Talk about. So one of the things I look at when I look at cultural problems is when you try to design culture. I always like to say that culture doesn't abide design. Culture is one of like you talked about it sort of with your definition. I like to say that culture is like gravity. It's omnipresent. It impacts every part of your business, and if you don't account for it, it's still getting its share.
Right.
So when you look at cultural design, how common is it from your experience that people know how to shape and mold it into something that they want it to be versus how often like culture just does what it wants to do?
Well, the thing that people have to understand is that your company culture took a long time to form. It did not form overnight. And by that same token, it's not changing overnight because your employees don't trust you. You just went to that seminar and you came home and you're inspired with 22 different things that you want to get done because this is what we have to do. This is the magic button. And your employees are saying, oh, no. She just went to another seminar. Let's just ignore everything she says for the next 2 weeks until things go back to normal because they don't trust you. You make a commitment to one thing. You find out, first of all, from your employees, what to you feels like a great culture. And let your employees define for you and then figure out a way to help them get that. Because when you're designing it around what they want, chances are, number one, what they want is a lot less than you think they want. And that's the scary part, that we don't want to ask the question because we think they're all going to ask for a $50 an hour raise and work 2 hours a week, and most of the time that's not it.
One of the things that I often have to help people understand is that culture is not just transnational culture. Culture's, engineering, sales, operations, all these different departments. And you're kind of talking about that. When you look across the aisle or across the pod farm and you go, stupid HR, always in my business, the damn lawyers. But if you went and actually engaged with them as a company, you'd probably find that you are a lot closer. They actually do work hard. Pretty much everybody is working about at their best, on a
Right.
given day. But that's not what happens in a company that has a corrosive culture.
Right, exactly. And too many times you mention HR, but too many times employee engagement is put on as an HR function. And that is not the place where it starts. It starts at the very top of the organization. And unless the president, the owner, the founder, the VPs, the senior staff, whoever is sitting in that C-suite, unless they get it, nothing else matters. When you bring in a trainer or when you put together a program, is your leadership team actually sitting there engaging, going through the same thing? Or are you sitting at the back of the room checking your email because, oh, this is for everybody else. This really doesn't apply to me. If that's the attitude that you have, you know what? You're wasting your money. It's not going to work. You need that buy-in from the top all the way down, because the people at the bottom are noticing what you're doing, and your actions, like the cliche says, your actions are speaking so much louder than anything that you say about what you want in your culture.
I worked at CDW for a while and did not fit in there, in part because I was just, employee number 2,922, and but that was it. But they forced us to go, already keyword, forced us to go through some training on inclusion training, where they wanted us to, damn it, you better feel included. And so I avoided it like the plague. My job was to be on the phones and sell computers, and I needed to make money. So me being in a room for 6 or 8 hours, that was not part of it until they literally like, today is your last day. You have to go. You have to do this. You don't have any other choice. And I went. And here's what I got out of this very expensive training. Everything was my fault. I would
Mm,
be more engaged if I just did what I was supposed to do to be part of the company. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been insulted, patronized, and it didn't seal my fate, but I knew that I didn't belong there because they didn't give two credit. And maybe all of this is untrue, but
mhm.
they did not care about me or my livelihood or my well-being or my struggle. All they cared about is that I went through that stupid training. And
They
then they
checked the
would talk out of
box.
the other side of their mouth every
Yep,
time they had a chance.
yep. They checked a box, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. What does it look like when it's right? When you see those leaders that get it, even if they need a severe tune-up, what does that look like?
I can quickly, when a lot in my programs and in my books, I talk about my thanks process, and I think that really seals it down. I'm an acronym girl, so this is the Cliff Notes version. But the first is that building trust, of
Mhm.
setting that foundation. Your employees don't always like what you have to tell them, but if they know you're coming from a point of integrity, authenticity, vulnerability, they will be much more likely to buy in and to trust you. The H, you help your employees, you invest in them. You invest in their training, not only, skills development, but personal development. Richard Branson says that you want to train your people well enough so that they can leave, but treat them well enough so that they don't want to. The A, my favorite step, is to acknowledge, applaud, appreciate. Let your people know that you appreciate, that are thanking them. Well, Lisa, why should I thank them for doing their job? That's what they get a paycheck for. No, be specific. Catch them in the act of doing things well. The N, navigating work-life integration, particularly these last couple months through the whole COVID-19 pandemic. We have had more work-life integration than probably most of us have ever wanted to have in our whole life. But we also have to figure that out in the workplace, because people have different priorities, and time is one of the most valuable assets that you have to give your employees. The K, get to know them. When you can walk through the office or walk through the plant and say, hey, Joe, how's your kids doing? How's your wife doing? And know something personal about them so that they are not employee number 2196.3, that they feel connected and that they feel, and especially right now, with this whole pandemic, what you're doing to your employees right now, how you're treating them is setting the precedent for whether they're going to be with you for the long term or not. Did you reach out to them? How are you doing? How are you managing your kids and taking care of your aging parents and getting your work done? And then the S is to serve a greater mission. When companies give back, in Cleveland here, we had a brewery that, flipped on a dime. Notice I did not say pivot. They flipped to go from making beer to making hand sanitizers. There was a clothing manufacturer here that they went from making suits to making masks. So when employees can see that their companies can flip like that and contribute to a mission that's greater than them, or maybe they're providing food to the food banks, or maybe they're just doing something that they're giving back and letting employees know and letting employees be a part of it. When you have all of those thanks steps at some level in play in your organization, I promise you, you cannot have a toxic culture.
Boy, you're 100% right. And by the way, if you guys are interested in more about what Lisa does, just go to Amazon, type in Lisa Ryan, and you're going to see she's written a lot of books. And
Actually,
listen to
Lisa
the words.
Ryan Gratici, just so you know, there's another Lisa Ryan who was in the 700 Club, a minister, not me.
Right. Yeah. And the links are in the show notes going right to the Amazon page with all of her books, just in general. But look at the words that are on the front of her books: gratitude, gratitude, verbal hug, gratitude, thank you, gratitude. This is truly like what you do. And you are so right. One of the things that I've learned along the way is that we are really hard on ourselves. And if no one ever comes by and says, hey, you really are doing incredible work, we won't even believe you. You could tell me right now, Lisa, I've looked at your show and you've had almost 800 episodes, and oh my God, you must work so hard. You're so good at this thing. I would be like, it's all right. Like, people will not believe you. Like, you really have to go and say, this is important for me. I want you to slow down for a second. I know you're doing a great job. I can see the numbers. You're absolutely part of this team and you're pulling as hard as anybody else. And I want you to know I see it and I appreciate you. And then
your response to that is simply thank you. Don't make up excuses, because you come across that I just want to be humble. Oh, it's really not that much. Oh, you know what? That person is giving you a gift by their saying thank you. You're rocking this. I've noticed the show. You've had these 800 guests, man. I love listening to your show every time it comes on. Thank you for doing this. And like I said, your response, thanks. Thank you.
And then as a leader,
that gift.
When you don't hear that, when you hear those negative values, you've got to smash that and say, you're not hearing me. You don't get it. I need you here. This is great, And that recognition, that gratitude, that thanks. Oh my God, it goes a long way. We had a sergeant, when I was in the Army, I had a sergeant major, and he said, you need to thank more people. And they aren't always directly part of your life. Like, one of the people I always stop and thank, and people who travel with me will kind of say, were you mocking that person? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. But that person, that last line of defense that you walk by as you leave the airport, you can't go past this point and they're facing the other direction.
Right.
They're literally looking at everybody's butts as they leave the terminal. I always stop and say, hey, thank you for being here in this thankless job. And, I just, nothing else. You don't got to do anything. Just, I appreciate you being here. Because it is literally a thankless job. No one's ever going to thank that person. Maybe not months until the next time they get thanked.
Mm-hmm. And you just made that person's day. You don't know what is going on in that person's life. Yeah. You don't know what happened to them 10 minutes before you came into that. And the fact that you can take a moment and create a moment for somebody else, it's magical. And that's all it takes. It doesn't take us a lot of extra time. It doesn't cost us a dime. Mm-hmm. It's just really focusing on finding the good and recognizing it, not assuming that people know. Well, of course, he's had 800 guests. Of course he knows he's a great podcaster. No. Yeah. To acknowledge that, and being specific too. That's the other thing, because people will say, Lisa, can you thank people too much? And it's like, well, yeah, if you go by and like you do the check the box, thanks. It's like, check, was that 5? Mm-hmm. Or, Pete, I
Mm,
really appreciate the fact that you put together all the research, that, you really schedule out your shows, that you do this, you make each of your guests feel important. Now, specifically, you know what I'm recognizing about you. You know where you're rocking it out. Same thing in the business. That boss catches their employee doing something right and saying, I really
yep.
appreciate the fact that you stayed after 45 minutes to help us get that order out. Meant a lot. Customer was happy. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it's so little and it
It's
means so much.
You talked about the number of thank yous as not being a good metric. I have a very similar thing I like to say, and this goes again back to my time as a spy in conflict zones. That you try to understand these things. It's affect always over effect. You can write 15 love letters, 15 thank you letters, but if you can get affect out of your action,
Hmm.
then I'll beat you any day of the week. You go do 100 things. I'll go do 5 things well that have that kind of trust, that emotion, that gratitude in it, and I'll whoop you every day of the week.
Right. Yep.
How do you practice that? I mean, it's one thing to tell someone you should appreciate people, but how do you in your life? What does that look like if I was to walk around with you?
Number one, I have a daily gratitude practice. And that's what even though I talk about employee engagement, I always start on the personal of finding gratitude for yourself. So I have a gratitude practice every morning before my feet touch the ground to take that long walk down the hallway. I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. And a lot of times I'll set the expectation. Like if I'm speaking that day, I'll say, I'm so grateful that I rock the presentation at wherever I'm speaking. So that way it sets that positive expectation. But after 11 years of keeping this gratitude journal, it literally has rewired my brain.
I love it.
You know, as a speaker,
Yes.
I would joke about the fact that, well, nothing bad ever happens to a speaker. We just get new material, you know. But what happens is that when these quote unquote bad things happen, yes, am I happy, happy, joy, joy all the time? No, just
No.
ask my husband, okay? But when I get angry or I get upset or I get frustrated or, all of these emotions that we're going through right now, there reaches a point that, I just stop and say,
Mm.
okay, what's one thing I can be grateful for? And even with everything that we're going through with COVID right now, and am I happy I'm not traveling and speaking on stages all over the country? No. Am I happy my husband's been on furlough since Good Friday?
No.
No, but on the other hand, am I grateful that I get to spend a lot of extra time with Scott? We've been married for 24 years. This is the most time we've gotten to spend together. We actually decided to drive down this weekend on Friday to Atlanta from Cleveland, pick up my mother, and come home yesterday. We got home last night. So 11 hours there, 11 hours back. My mom's going to be with us for a couple weeks. We would not be able to do that if Scott was still working full time. So it's kind of taking a step back. When you don't have control over a situation, you look for the good and you move on. And we do that in our personal lives and in our businesses.
One of the things that I've learned too is again that we're too hard on ourselves, and we often put the bar up at 8 feet and try to jump over 8 feet every day. And often, like we're not getting over 4 feet, but if you lower that bar to a realistic thing, like, hey, today I'm going to do these things,
Hmm.
and then because you're an adult, chaos happens. All of a sudden, the washing machine breaks, and you're like, I didn't get to those last 3 things. Like, by the way, you did a lot of other unexpected things. Not that you can't stay on task, but put the bar on the floor
Right.
and work your way up. Like just get over the bar repeatedly and be like, I actually am getting a lot of things done. You don't have to. You can't try for a home run every day. The home runs will come if you're just hitting, baseball analogies. If you're hitting singles, I totally believe in that. Do
Yeah.
you have a reminder for yourself, like, hey, I am absolutely over expecting from what I'm trying to do today? Like, are you able to ratchet back or readjust what your expectations are?
It goes in spurts,
Mhm.
like with anything. I mean, there's some days that I'm really, really good at it, and then there's other days where it's just, frustrating. But I always come back to, what can I find to be grateful for? Or I'll take the time to read good books, to be inspired, to watch, to listen to podcasts. One of my favorite practices, and again, I'm pretty good with doing this, but a gentleman named David Steindl-Rast, he's a monk, and he has a beautiful YouTube videos, and he also did a TED Talk on gratitude. But what he talks about is the power of water. So anytime he has contact with water, whether he's washing his hands, taking a shower, looking at water, that's his reminder to express gratitude. My reminder is really, the first thing in the morning when I write down my gratitudes, but that gets me throughout the day. So
Yeah.
there's always something, and and I'm always the one that is encouraging other people. Well, what can we find to be grateful for in this situation?
Yeah. You and I, again, are birds of a feather. You are known for, when you do your presentation, not using a PowerPoint slide. My favorite slide to send, when they're like, I need your slide deck. I'm like, no problem. Do I have to have one? Yes. Yeah. We got to make sure. Okay, great. Then I send them a blank slide.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just put this up there. This is my slide. This illustrates everything I want you to know, and they're like, it's a blank slide. And I'm like, it's perfect.
Yep.
So talk about your ability to get away from things like slides, and why. What's the mechanism for you?
Yeah. Well, and I do and I don't. It really depends, because one of the things I started doing, I didn't use slides at all for about 3 years. And then I had a giveaway in my programs where they would, text the word engage, and then they would get a copy of my book. So it was easier for me to put that on a slide
Sure.
than it was to just say it. So on some audiences, I will use the decks, but when I do, they're pictures. I have very few words.
Right.
And a lot of times, if I'm speaking, like I had a webinar that I did for a material handling association. So everything was, people working in a plant with material handling equipment. So it's personalized, and I have some fun stuff in there. But a lot of times what people are looking for is, they are not looking for words on a slide. They are looking at you and what you bring, and then the slides enhance that. So
Right.
the slides, represent the stories that you're telling them, the connection that you're making with them. And a lot of times I like taking advantage of the wisdom in the room, where if I'm speaking to a manufacturing association, and again, I had 7 years in the welding industry, so I may not have your exact experience. And sometimes people will write that off. Well, she hasn't been in my business. She doesn't understand. So when you go through the crowd and say, okay, well, what's something that you're doing to recognize your employee? And I will hand the microphone to that person, and they share. And it could be something like from my playbook, exactly what I would have said it. But the fact that it's coming from one of their peers in the room, because when I speak, it is not about me. It's about, how am I bringing value to you in the room? What am I giving you that's going to help you to make that one little tweak to your culture?
I love it.
That's going to make things better.
I love it. I talk about, if I gave you control of the dial or the knob or the slider, and you could change one thing, what's that one thing that you would change? And how much would you slide it over? Is this a little adjustment, or is this a big adjustment?
Yeah.
And you get incredible answers from these kinds of things. What would you say is the most common adjustment a company needs, regardless of their cultural and engagement health? What's the one thing that they just all need to tune up on a little bit?
You know what? The funniest thing is, whenever I do my programs, it always comes down to gratitude. I will ask people, and I'll go around the room, or I'll have them share what's something you're going to do as a result of our time together. The number one answer is keep a gratitude journal. Now, keep in mind, my audiences are primarily men, okay?
Right. Yeah.
Blue collar men. So it's the gratitude journal, and it's I need to thank people more often. I need to catch people doing things right. I need to actually get to know my employees and verbally let people know how I appreciate them. So
Yeah.
no matter what you do with employee engagement, no matter what programs you bring in, all of this kind of stuff, if you can just start with number one, finding the good in your life by recording it in a gratitude journal and really kind of forcing yourself to find the good, then you are bringing that person into the office who's used to finding the good, and then that starts to translate. Now you're telling your employees, "Thank you, I really appreciate you, man. You just do. I can count on you. You're always here.
Yeah.
Thank you." And sometimes it starts with the apology approach, because if I come up to you and I say, "Hey, Pete, thanks," and I've never thanked you before, you're going to be like, "Uh-oh,
Yeah.
what does she want?"
Yep.
But if I, on the other hand, I say, Pete, I apologize. I have not been letting you know how much I appreciate you, and I'm going to do a better job of that. Now you know that it's something, the onus is on me, that I'm taking accountability to be more verbally appreciative. And so when I thank you, you're like, oh, she's actually sticking with it. She's actually doing what she said she was going to do. And then we go back to building that trust, and that's what
I love it.
happens.
I love it. So one of the, this it I give you very common advice whenever I have these opportunities to how do you do culture better, and absolutely trust and gratitude. These are key elements for what we do. And I'll tell the CEO, like, when was the last time you brought someone in your office just to thank them, or whatever level, the VP level, because like, hey, come to my office, you're like, oh God, oh God. I mean, you think about how terrified people are because only bad things happen when the boss calls you,
Yep.
and you're like, no, no, no. I want you to walk out of here like stoked, like, hey man, or hey lady, you're crushing it. You're really, taking time to thank that person. And this goes to, and this is relevant to our time right now, like with the police, they always talk, and it's a hard job to be the police. It's a hard job to run the police and
Mhm.
everything else. But they always say they want to build trust with the community. And I'm like, you have to act like it. You have to outwork your trust problem, in terms of the police. And this is Pete talking. I'm not putting words in Lisa's mouth.
Right.
But whenever I say, when was the last time you invited someone from the community to come along and observe training? Like, you're going to do school shooter training, active shooter training at the school. How many parents are you inviting as your personal guest? Like, come spend the day, take a day off of work if you have to. I'll feed you. I want you to come see what we're doing to protect this community. And the answer is none of them do it. They're like, well, people do ride-alongs all the time. I'm like, no, you have to reach out. You have to call up and say, hey, Mrs. Ryan, would you come down and be my guest all day long while we do this incredible police training? I want you to see what we're doing for the community.
Yeah.
And you and I both know how powerful that would be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because when the CEO does that, or the boss walks through the plant and just says hello to somebody by name, that manager, that leader, that president, that owner is seen differently. And when you walk through and you're like, hey, Bob, how you doing? She knows my name. The CEO calls you in the office and says, hey, I just want to let you know you are killing it out there, man. You're doing such a good job, and I just appreciate it. That person walks out of there 10 feet tall. Do you think that maybe that was the day that if they were thinking about putting together their resume, because this place sucks, and the CEO calls them in and tells them that they're killing it, I think that person just goes and rips up that resume and goes back to work, because those are the little differences we can make just by recognizing people and recognizing them at a very high level too.
When I'm in combat zones working, one of the things I look for is a connection to the government, because we're always trying to create a stable government. And so I'll say, like, what was the last thing, even the smallest, most ridiculous thing the government's done for you? Or I'll point at the building and say, what goes on in that government building over there? And, they typically laugh and they say nothing. And I'm like, come on, nothing, not even one. Can you think of one example, even from years and years ago? No, nothing, nothing, nothing. And then I'll work hard at this, because I'm like, give me an example of something that they should be able to do. And I look for any kind of connection, because then I take that back to the Army or to the State Department and I say, I cannot find anybody that cares about this government. Here we are working our hearts out, We're in harm's way to try to build some kind of government here, and I can't get these guys to admit any success. Is that important for you to know, boss man? And the answer to that is, of course, like, what the hell are we doing here? I got to rethink everything.
Right.
When
Oh.
How pliable are the people that you talk to? I mean, sure, they hire you to come in. Sure, you're speaking or giving training or whatever it is, but how pliable are they? Like, do they understand how much this matters to their business?
You know what? Most of them do. Um, I was going through, before I start one of my programs, I like to walk around the room. Well, when I used to do live programs, and walk around the
Yeah.
room and talk to people and just welcome them and everything. And this was one of the last programs I did before everything shut down. I was doing my little howdy round in the morning, and this guy just jumped on me. He was like, "This is nothing but a bunch of crap and psychobabble. All you need to do is pay people more money and they'll stay. They don't care about all this engagement stuff." And I was like, number one, I was kind of blown away. Like, holy guacamole, I would not want to work for him. And so I maintained composure and I said, if you would just be open and look for one idea, at the end, let me know. I hope this helps you. And at the end of the program, sure enough, he was walking out. I'm like, so was there something you could use? And it was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, there was. So even the most hardened
Yeah.
person, because then he said, have you ever run a company? Yeah, I have for the last 11 years. Have you ever had employees? Yes. Have you ever had hundreds of employees? No. And that's when he thought that he had me. He's
Yeah.
like, you have to just pay these people money. And it was funny because that was actually before I discovered the Amazon factor.
Mm.
The Amazon factor, if you think like in Cleveland, we have a couple, Amazon is taking over all the old malls and
Right.
building there. Amazon is paying almost $18 an hour to start. I know people that, they have some of the shifts there where they're making double time, more than double time. So $40 an hour working at Amazon. Okay. If it was all about the money, every single person in a city would be working for Amazon and would never leave.
Yeah.
But what's going on? Amazon has a 100.6% turnover, which means that 100% of their staff is turning over. People, I'm sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox here. Not about the money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not about the money. You're right. And that, again, that's effect thinking over affect thinking.
Yep.
And I'm not saying you don't have to pay your employees. You do. And you probably want to promote more people too, because, people that are passed over for promotion, guess what they're doing? They're going to leave. They may stay for a while, but you no longer have that engaged employee.
Yep.
You have an employee that does their job, and either they're 8 and hit the gate kind of folks, which are fine, or they're like, I'll be here. You're never going to know it. They're going to put that knife in your back, because here's the other thing that I've learned too about corporations. Everything's hunky dory and everything. And you're out there working hard, and all of a sudden one day they're like, hey, Lisa, would you join us in the conference room real quick? And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. And you walk in, and then you walk out with a box in your hand and 2 people following you till you leave the door. And you're like, I did, like the when you talk about building trust, when you see that performed as someone who didn't get their head cut off, you're like, boy, I don't care about this place at all, because they do not care. You preach family on the wall, but what you did, you just gutted somebody who I cared about, who I know was a good employee.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny that you brought that up, because when I was in medical sales, my position was actually eliminated via group conference call on October 12th, 2010, with 12 of us getting canned at the same time. There was never, I'd been there for 7 years. I was on every marketing team. I was one of the top performers in the company, and there was never so much as a thank you. There was never so much as we're sorry. We have to let you go. This is a financial decision. It's not personal. We really value you. All these little things that they could have done.
Yes.
And it took that company more than 6 years to recover from that, because anytime there was a conference call, anytime there was any meeting, those employees who are left going, oh no, is it going to happen again? Because it was done so poorly and it didn't need to be.
So lesson learned there, like, oh, conference call invite? Sorry, not going to make it.
Yeah. Well,
Damn it.
one of the women that were supposed to be on the let go call was
Mhm.
actually on the main call where they read a note with all the people's names that had been let go. And she was actually on the call and heard her own name on the list. So I think I was glad that I was on the original call.
Yeah. One of the things you've talked about is building trust, and you've been a salesperson, and so you'll know this as well. But this is just more for the audience. We often hear things like, "You must build rapport. You have to build trust." And again, that's where the knowledge stops, and like the actual steps to build rapport, to build trust. So, and for me, rapport is a subset of trust. Like if you've got rapport, you can start to work your way into more of an exchange of trust at different levels of terrifying, like big trust, small trust, right? High
Right.
risk trust, low risk trust. When you are a company or you're a leader in a company, how do you reliably build trust? And then the next thing, and because we have to talk about this at a higher level, how do you test for trust? Because I know how I do it, but how do you see these concepts working?
Well, the building the trust is those little actions that you're taking every day, that you're consistent in your words, that you're letting your employees know that you trust them by asking them, how are you doing? If, what keeps you here? What would make you leave? What are some of the things that we can work on? What can I do better as a boss? And then when that employee gives you their, if they feel safe enough to give you that feedback, it is poker face. And the only words that come from you are thank you for sharing. And no matter what they said, no matter what the context was, that you're learning something from that. Because trust is something that takes years to build. And unfortunately, one eye roll, one negative remark, one, fighting them back with a suggestion or telling them that was stupid or that'll never work, they will never trust you again.
Nope.
It's really, modeling the behavior that you want to see. I had one of my clients, and he was talking about the fact that he walks around, they were slow for a while, and he was walking around the perimeter of the plant picking up garbage. And some of his other managers and stuff are like, what are you doing? That's not your job. And he's like, you know what? Today it is. Because
Yeah.
I want to be out here and model the behavior. I want people to care enough about this plant that when they see a piece of trash around, that they'll say, hey, if the owner of the company can pick up trash, I can pick up trash too.
Yeah. Yeah, that modeling behavior. And again, that's part of that gratitude practice, right? Like to be grateful, to be gracious. Like one of my things I try to do is I try to default to being gracious. And it's not easy. I fail at it all the time, but it's a thing that I always work for as my goal. Do you have some defaults apart from gratitude that you're like, I'm always trying to respond to situations in this way?
You know, I always, uh, I'm always transparent and honest with people. I think that that's what they expect from me. And if they ask me a question and I know it's a hard answer that I have to give them, I will preface it. I just don't come out and say, well, that would, I say, there's some things that I would like to share with you. Can we have a coaching minute? Um, so I deliver news the way that I like to get news. And that's like, don't tell me the story and all the fluff and stuff. Just give me the point. Whether
Yeah.
I like it, if you think I'm going to be mad about it, just, rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
um, and I think it's that level of authenticity is that with me, people generally know what they're going to get, So
Mhm.
I'm like this all the time with
Yeah.
my clients. You know, I'm not a prima donna. I actually, a lot of my clients become my friends because even after I do a speaking engagement for them, I don't go away. I
Right.
continue to provide value. I continue to stay in touch. I have so many conversations with clients before I meet them, and I do so many things to help them before. It's like the first time we meet each other, it feels like we've known each other forever, and
Sure.
that's what you want. You talked about being in sales, and sales is not about closing the sale, getting the money. Closing is about sales is about building that long-term relationship with people that you know, like, and trust to provide services that they will benefit from, and you benefit as a result
Right.
of you making that connection for them. So I'm very glad, and I know as a speaker, I thank God every day for my 25 years in sales, because for me, it's just an easy thing to do. Now, selling myself is not is not all the time as easy as selling a box of welding rod. You
Sure.
know, you
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
need the welding rod or you don't. But for people who are speakers and are really good at what they do, you know, they have a great speech, but if they're not picking up the phone, if they're not building relationships, if they're not asking for the order, it's not going to work.
Yeah. 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 No, that's a great point. The asking for the order and just those transferring those skills from welding rod sales lady to, selling what Lisa brings. It's yeah, right. And it in a lot of ways it is harder because you have to again believe in yourself. There's so many more places to screw up because you have all the hats on and everything. And so
Right.
hats off to you for managing to manage that because it is something that all of us, sole proprietor, entrepreneur type folks, it's one of the things we battle all the time is the uncertainty of everything. I mean, here comes COVID. Your business model is probably just completely changed and may
Yep.
never go back to what it was 8 months ago, where you're like, this is 2020 is going to be the best year ever. You're like, well,
It
actually
was
your entire
turning out to
business
be
has
that way.
changed. There is no event business anymore. We aren't speaking to large crowd. It's like, oh my God.
But
How,
there's been some forced changes that would
yeah,
have never happened if COVID wasn't here. And I think that it's going to be for the better. There's so many good things that are going to come out of this. Right now, it's a pain. Right
yeah,
now, people are scared. Right now, travel and the meetings industry is kind of tanked. But
yeah,
um, the lessons for being able to master virtual, for being able to connect with people who may never have come to a live event, but they're perfectly willing to pay to attend, a virtual event where they're going to get some great information and
right.
make some positive changes to their business. This would have never happened had we not been forced to make these changes.
Yeah, yeah. And when you realize the amount of time you spend doing things that aren't on task for you, you know, we can't. You got to be pretty focused to do what we're doing, this human interaction thing. But like as I'm prepping for you, I can be doing the dishes and listening to you do an interview, and all these other ways to do our job to actually have more time to focus. And I don't like to multitask too much, but something like doing the dishes, folding laundry, these are things that have to get done and they're fairly mindless instead of watching TV. I can listen to what you've already talked about. I mean, that's why I know about the PowerPoint slide thing.
Right.
Let's I want to get back into engagement. No, yeah, let me ask you a different question. So I worked again at CDW, and this is an example for me for like how bad a corporation can be, even if it has a lot of success. I sat down across from, so I had a multi-million-dollar idea that I had proven the concept, brought it to my boss and said, hey, there's all this business with Microsoft that we could be doing, and no one's accounting for it. And he's like, oh my God, you're right. There's a lot of money here. Let's bring this to the guy who owns this sort of punk of the pie. And so I went to that. I set a meeting. I went to this guy's meeting. And though he knows my name, he knows nothing about me. And so I assume this about him. And we have this conversation. And he basically belittles my idea and says he's already doing it. But the whole point of the meeting is that no one is doing it. I had already done the work. I had already asked his team. And they're like, yeah, nobody's doing this. This is a great idea. We don't even have time to do it. It would be awesome to have someone work on this multi-million-dollar piece of business that we don't even know exists.
Wow.
And so he management 101s me and says, "Oh, Pete, how do you think the meeting went?" And this is after he patronized me. And I'm like, "Well, it went pretty poorly for you." And he was shocked to hear that. And so he tried to active listen me through the whole thing. What he doesn't know about me is I'm a trained spy. I know how to run a conversation. I've got an advanced degree in management. And so I let him set up this entire ridiculous scenario. I just walked him down the path to his own conclusion. And then I put the lid on him, and then I popped the lid open and said, "Ta-da!" So here's ultimately what happens. He talks down to me. He belittles me. He gives me advice that I'm able to. I already know all the things he's going to say. So, like, okay, well, what help me understand? Whatever can I do to improve to become a person like you who has a position? He's like, "Well, do this," and I'm like, "Okay, so I've done that, and do this." Like, "But you guys have gotten there. You said yourself you didn't do those things. So is that really important?" Like, "Hey, that's really not important." Like, "Well, what else can I do?" And he's like, "You could get an advanced degree." And I said, "Okay, great. Well, let me tell you the story. I have one. It's in management. And all you've done is talk down to me. So here's how this will go from now on. Anytime I see you, if you talk to me, I'll assume you're harassing me and I'll go to HR every single time. Don't talk to me. Don't look at me." And that guy would walk across the entire building to avoid me.
Wow.
This is not an outcome that any corporation wants, but this was the normal outcome. And they never acted on the idea that I told them about, and have this guy that I saw that guy and I just hated him. I hated him because he treated me so terribly, never bothered to ask me about me or anything. He just didn't care about me, and he proved it. So, I mean, you think about those kind of outcomes. How many of those can a company withstand? But before, I mean, here's a successful company and they have all this poison in there. I would see people leave all the time, and they would go on and get promoted at their next spot. Like instantly, they would be in a better position instantly because the company couldn't recognize it. How does that happen? How long can that go on before the company really starts to tear itself apart from the inside?
Well, now that you have websites like Glassdoor,
Ooh, yeah.
you have employees. If I'm an employee and I'm a potential employee looking for a job, and I decide to check out your organization, and I go on Glassdoor and see that it's getting a 10% overall rating, everybody hates it there. They're saying that management are idiots and all of this other stuff. You're not even, and I could be perfect for your job. You're not even going to know that I exist because I won't even give you the courtesy of filling out your online form. So there's only so much time when we look at, right now, because, there's lots of people unemployed because of COVID, but when the markets come back, and they will, those employees are going to decide, am I going to come back to this toxic culture? Because think about what just happened. For 3 months, employees have been at home with their kids. They've been working from home. They've been, kind of seeing what life is like with all that without all that toxic stress that they've been under for the last 5 years working at your company. And they're going to go back and they're going to recognize the poison. It's like going on vacation and you come in the house and the first thing you do is to smell your house. To see, can people smell my cats, or is my house, because I haven't been in my house for 2 weeks. Okay.
Right.
And it's the same thing. People will go back to work and it's like, do I really want to take this on again when I've just released all of this? So there's companies that can go on for years and continue to be successful, but will they ever be as successful as they could have been had they just taken into effect these basic human connections, these basic human needs, starting at the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, hierarchy. There's Pavlov. I was kind of like,
either way, it's the same kind of.
But even at the very beginning, are we making them feel safe? Are we you talked about money, food and shelter, bottom of the pyramid, are we giving them a marketable
Mhm.
wage, and then giving them money to recognize them for the good? Do they feel safe working for us? Are we giving them opportunities to grow in the organization? Do they
Oh
have
boy.
those different things that we can, as an organization, can meet those needs? Because if you're at
Yep.
rock bottom where the only thing you're doing is giving them a little bit of money so they can put, the basics of food
Yeah.
on their table, you will never get to where you look at, the top places to work for and the types of cultures that those people have created. There's such a huge difference. The energy, like you were
Oh,
talking about
yeah.
the Tuthill guy earlier. You were just talking. It's like I'm like, I would love to work there.
Me too. I'm like,
Yeah,
can I work with you guys? It's so
yeah.
great. He's so great at it. I'm like, I have to have him on my show. So I
Hmm.
had two of his employees on, and they wowed me so much because you and I we recognize this cultural part. I'm like, I have to have Jay on the show. Jay Tuthill has to come on, and we had this wonderful conversation. Here's a guy that he gets it, and he saw how his dad ran the company before him in a different era, different model, different mode. Command and control based. He's like, that's not what I'm going to do. That's
Right.
not my job.
Yep.
It's incredible. I've beat on you for about an hour asking you all the hard questions. I want to give you a chance to ask me anything you want to because we do collaborate and cross over so much without ever knowing each other. What do you want to ask?
Oh boy. Well, what is when it comes to gratitude, have you done studies on it? Do you have your own practice? What have you seen? Obviously, we're on that same
Yeah,
cycle, but I guess that would be my biggest question is, where do you fall? Who have you studied? What have you learned?
right. So most of my learning is experiential, then reinforced on the back end by something I discover later on. So it's less gratitude focused and more appreciating who they are and what their day is like. Not different, just a slightly
Yeah.
different angle of approach. Because when you're in a conflict zone and people don't have enough, they don't have access to bananas or safety, or they can't even worry about their kids going to college because they're worried about their kids staying alive. You have to appreciate where they're at because if
Yeah.
I'm too far down the road, I'm not relevant. It's like one thing like a while back, one of the guys who ran the UN, he said, I tried to lead by example, but nobody followed. Well, that's a leadership problem, you know? And
Yeah.
so when I'm trying to help understand who this person is and communicate that back to the people that I'm working with on my side, I'm always trying to understand what is the simplest thing that we could do today, the most the common problem that we could maybe solve, and then I try to work on the best way to solve it so that it's not just the army solving it or the Americans solving it, because ultimately, if a problem isn't provisioned by the Afghans, if the answer's not there, then it's not something we need to get involved in most of the time as a norm. You
Right.
can defy that by exception, but like one time they said, "Hey, the road is just getting rutted from the rain that falls over it and just all the traffic, and we have no ability to pat down the dirt, in a way that makes any kind of sense, and so it's tearing our cars apart."
Mm.
And so I looked at the governor, the Afghan governor, and he's like, "What do we do about this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. What resources do you need?" He's like, "You guys have that tractor thing. Can we use that to go fix that road?" And I'm like, well, let's find out. And so then we asked the American counterpart, and he's like, yeah, of course. And I'd already told him, like, hey, listen, when this guy asks you for something and you're there in front of all the village people, you just say, yes, sir, yes, boss. Call him the boss, because if you're the government and you're not considered the boss by anybody, then you're not the boss of anything.
Right.
And so that's sort of appreciating where they were at. And in the smallest, most one
Mm.
of the biggest things I learned early on in my military career was we were in Bosnia. Everybody's trying to rebuild their lives because they've blown each other's lives up. So now they're rebuilding homes as a community. And I asked the guy, I'm like, hey, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a terrible spy. That's completely inexperienced at this point. And the guy basically says the thing that we don't have that we should normally have, but because it's terrible here right now, is sunscreen. So everybody gets sunburned every single day. We have no protection from the sun, and it's just tearing us apart. It's extraordinarily uncomfortable. But these houses have to get built. And I said, okay. And so the next day I brought him a box. The next time I saw him, I brought him a box of sunscreen. And I'm like, there's as much of this as, because it's the Army. We have
Right.
gallons and gallons. Costco's got nothing on us in terms of how much sunscreen we have. And the guy basically broke down. I almost cried right in front of me.
Wow.
Like, no one's done anything this kind for us in so long. And it was the simple, the stupid thing. And that opened the door for me to meet a lot of other people that otherwise I didn't even know there was a door there to open. So how
Wow.
can you find a door if it looks like a wall, you know? And so he
Right.
opened it up, and I got to, because my job is to meet just the worst people, the most evil people in the valley, because they're the ones planning all the bad things. And so you don't get to meet those people unless you can find your way. And so my approach to that gratitude aspect is to appreciate where they're at and how simple the answer might be, and not to minimize their problems, but just to start the smallest thing and build that possibility from that little appreciative germ.
Right. Wow, that's beautiful. That's such an amazing mission that you have been on. So thank you for, everything that you've done to serve and to make
Oh,
people's
thanks.
lives better. So
Mary's got a question. If we had, yeah, we got time for one more.
sure.
How much of the workforce do you expect to keep working from home due to safe distancing protocols? What are your thoughts?
A lot more than a lot more companies are going to go to stay at home. And I don't even think that it's necessarily due to the safe distancing protocols. I think because businesses are going to see that their employees can actually be productive at home.
Mm.
My husband works for a company where he's an accountant. He works for a manufacturing plant in the accounting end of it. And until he went on furlough, for the first 2 weeks, he worked at home. Now, this
Mm.
was his bosses
Yeah.
were always like, there's no way you can work at home. You're an accountant. There's all of the security and all of this kind of stuff. And yet, Scott was perfectly able to work a full day and get a lot done, and he wasn't being interrupted by people. He wasn't being pulled into meetings. So what a lot of companies are going to do, number one, companies will see, wow, I can actually get some productivity, and maybe I don't need this big office space, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't need all of these employees to come in. And the employees are going to be, wow, even if I can work at home, 1 or 2 days a week, I've now proven to my boss that I can work at
Mm-hmm.
home. And so you have kind of the best of both worlds. You have the interaction and stuff in the company,
Yeah.
and then you also have the ability to work from home. But the safe distancing protocols in some businesses, that's really tough.
Yeah.
Because in my husband's plant, they're working right next to each other on the line. They just have to figure it out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I think that organizations are doing the best that they can with what they have, but I do believe, and this is not based on any of my own research,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe that you're going to see a much greater percentage of people working from home just because they can.
I love it. And then when the ops guy says, "Hey, that lease is coming up for this 25,000 square foot facility. Hey, why don't we cut it by 20% and save that money? Because that looks good to any boss." You're like,
Mhm.
"Hey," and all of a sudden, no one cares where everybody's working from, as long as you're saving money and people are still being productive.
Yeah,
And
and do the
and how much
hours.
did your husband miss his commute every day to work? By the way.
None at all. Not at all. Because that's the thing, and he had an easy commute. He's only like 25 minutes from home.
Yeah.
But I think about I have a lot of family in Atlanta, and you think about Atlanta, I mean, their rush
Yeah.
hour is 4 hours each way a
Yeah.
day. And to just get the gift of time back, of not have
Boy.
to sit in traffic and not have that commute, that's a gift right there. So your
Yeah.
productivity is going up because your stress levels are coming down so much.
Just the in overall saga of the journey every single day has
Yep.
got to cost a company millions of dollars, having
Mhm.
people drive from wherever it is they can afford to live, and just to endure that, the whatever you do to fill that time, if you're listening to hateful stuff on the radio with all the news, like, your condition of your mind as you get up out of bed and do whatever your practice is, and then you get to work, you can be substantially ahead of the game just mentally,
Right.
and
Yep.
physically too. Yeah. Yeah. What a great point. Um, that just not having to commute. And your husband's still commuting an hour every day. You know,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
you
Yep.
could have a 10-minute commute. Well, now you got 20 minutes back to go for a walk,
Mhm.
which I'd rather, as a CEO, I'd rather you go for a walk and make me pay for that walk so that you're in a better, healthy mental
Yep.
position than to, drive in a car somewhere.
Yep.
Like, please don't do that. Please go for a walk.
Right.
So everybody can find out about Lisa at her website, lisaryanspeaks.com. The links will be in the show notes, and you can follow her on Twitter. You can follow her on LinkedIn. If you can't figure out which Lisa Ryan she is, if you write in Lisa Ryan Speaker, she usually is the person that comes
Yep.
up. As always, you can hit me up at P. Day Turner, and I will direct you to Lisa. So no worries in that. And really, seriously, I love what you're doing. I love that you focus on the gratitude part of it. The gratitude professor, all these people that focus on appreciating other people. I just think especially right now, like where it's so easy to dismiss and be hateful
Right.
towards other people, it makes all the more point for you that appreciating people will help you be miles ahead of anybody else. Thank you so much for coming on.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to sign off. Stand by.